companies hate to
Okay,
pay
we
out
should be
money
recording now. All right, hello everyone.
companies unless
Hello.
they are
Hello.
totally satisfied.
If you don't mind, I am going to mute you so that we do not have feedback as we start this presentation. So thank you guys for coming this afternoon. For those of y'all who don't know, my name is John Latham, and I am going to be giving a presentation on biblical models of creation. All right, and that's a lot of words. And really what my job here today is try to unpack that for you to help it make more sense and to hopefully at the end of it help you be able to merge the ideas of both religious views of creation and science's views of creation. And hopefully by the end of this, you will be able to draw your own conclusion based on a model, a biblical model of creation. So at any point during this presentation, I want you to feel free to ask a question because we're going to be talking about words that you may not know or a concept you may not know. And the best thing to do for everyone is if you have a question, other people may have a question. And so it's just best to raise your hand. I will unmute you and you can then ask your question. Okay? All right, so here we go. We're going to go ahead and get started. So again, we're going to talk about biblical models of creation, and what we are attempting to do is answer this question. How long does it take, or how long did it take to make dirt? Something very simple. How long does it take to make dirt? This topic for me, quick disclaimer, am I an expert on this topic? No, I am not. Have I been introduced to this topic and have been educated on this topic? Yes. So I have a basic understanding of this topic, and I am attempting to teach that to others so that you are able to draw your own conclusion while also being able to expand your knowledge of the subject and do further research if that's what you desire, okay? So I needed to give that disclaimer out. So how long does it take to make dirt? So for me specifically, when this topic, biblical models of creation, was presented to me, I had no idea what it meant. No idea. I was just, cool, biblical models. I don't know of any. I don't even know if I have one. What is that? Because all I knew about creation is what the Bible says in Genesis chapter 1. If you have a copy of God's word, you can open it or look at it. I'm just going to read a short bit in Genesis chapter 1 to just give you a basic understanding of where I came from jumping into this topic and where some of you may be in this topic. Because when you hear the word biblical models of creation, you're like, okay, biblical, so I guess that means Bible, model, okay, picture or something, creation, oh, how everything was made. So that's kind of where we're going. So all I knew was Genesis chapter 1. And let me just give you a basic idea of where I was in start of this. So Genesis chapter 1, starting in verse 1 says, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void. The darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day." Skipping some, start going to verse 9 now. "And God said, 'Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear.' And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good." Skipping some more. I'm going to verse 20 now. "And God said, 'Let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens.' So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good, and God blessed them, saying, 'Be fruitful and multiply, fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth.' and there was evening, and there was morning, the fifth day. So I read all that just to show you, like, that's where I was at the beginning of this. That's all I knew. Genesis chapter 1. So, okay, God created this, and I guess that just, okay, it happened. He said it did, so I guess it just happened. A day's a day, I guess. I don't know what that means. So in being introduced to this biblical models of creation, it was just, okay, a day means a day. I'm going through a day right now. It's in the afternoon. I'm ready for a nap. I don't know about y'all, but we'll just see. So that's what I knew. But diving into this, you get into different terms that can come about when looking at biblical models of creation. There's different models to creation. So that's why the question was presented, how long does it take to make dirt? Because there's different models, there's different perspectives of how long it took to make dirt. There's different interpretations of understanding of how long it took to do this in Genesis chapter 1. When God said it was evening, it was morning, the first day, there's discussion and models of how long that day was. And so that's what we're getting into. So some different terms that you're going to hear is a young earth, old earth, theistic evolution. All of these three terms are what we're going to be mostly looking at today. So again, young earth, old earth, and theistic evolution. And so to get into it, let's just start with young earth. What is that? What does that mean? Let's look at that. Most of people of faith in the Christian faith, most of them start off with this young earth model of creation of understanding. And that is what I just presented to you by reading in Genesis chapter 1, of just reading the Bible for what it says. And it says there's evening, there's morning, the first day. So a day must be what we consider a day right now, a 24-hour day, okay? So that is where this young earth comes into the. So those who believe this view of creation take Genesis chapter 1 very literally interpretation. That's what we just got, very literally. This view holds a day to be equivalent to a 24-hour period that would put Earth's creation to take place in 6 days, which would then put the age of the Earth and universe at about 6,000 years old. So this young Earth model of creation says that our Earth is roughly about 6,000 years old. And that is going about interpreting Genesis chapter 1 in a very literal understanding and taking a day as a 24-hour period. Okay? And those who stand in this view are skeptical of mainstream science and believe that geological aging is unreliable for analyzing the age of artifacts discovered. Okay, before we jump into the next model, are there any questions at this time? Do you have a basic understanding of what a young Earth biblical model is? I'm going to unmute one of you. We'll go with Melinda. Let me unmute you. Ask to unmute. Yeah, you're going to have to unmute yourself. I apologize.
TV.
There you go. Do you have any questions about young Earth? Or do you have a basic understanding of that?
The TV got broken.
I understand it.
Okay, awesome. All right. I'm not seeing anyone else, so I'll mute you back. And we'll move on then. So that's the first model. We're going to go into a second model now. The next model of creation to consider, again, we are going to be looking at 3. This is the second of the third. The second model of creation to consider is an old Earth model. In this model, believers are not afraid to embrace science to help explain the universe and Earth's creation, okay? So in this model, you can already start seeing a difference between a young Earth model and an old Earth model. Again, if you remember in the young earth model at the very end, we talked about how most people are skeptical of mainstream science. They do not think that science should be involved in the creation account or being able to interpret how long a day is. Science should not be involved. So in this old earth model, you already see that some people embrace some science to better interpret what we just read in Genesis chapter 1. They are putting some science in with that, okay? So one of the main differences also between the young and old earth is the understanding and interpretation of a day. Okay, we were just kind of hitting on that in chapter 1. So the old earth, a day can represent 24 hours and be explained as an extended period of time. So what that kind of means. So in an old earth biblical model, what they are saying is that when Genesis talks about, and there is evening and there is morning, the first day, old earth model, people who believe in that model say that that day could have been a 24-hour period, but it could also have been an extended period of time, because they take other passages of scripture as a day to us is like 1,000 years in heaven. So they're taking that as in, well, this day could be, well, is it a heaven day, which means it's 1,000 years for us, or is it just a day? We don't know. And so they're putting in some science in there to also age the earth. So they will accept some of those geological aging methods to age the earth. And so with them, in this view, creation can span billions of years rather than just that 6,000 years that young earth model people believe, because they only view a day as 24-hour period, which would roughly put us at 6,000 years. Whereas old earth people would, again, agree a little bit more with science. They would agree a little bit more with our geographers and those who would examine fossils and aging fossils that we see that they say is billions of years old, that they have discovered from the earth by doing their geological aging methods, which then they would roughly age the earth at billions of years old rather than 6,000. Okay, any questions on this model as we continue to move forward? Okay, we have another question. Okay, go ahead and unmute.
Yes, I just want to verify that you were saying that the young is only the 24 hours in a day, is their belief. And the old is going with what the Bible said, and it could be several days or several years. Is that correct?
All right, let me make sure I'm answering your question correctly. Okay, so go ahead and unmute so we don't get feedback, and I will try to answer that question. So the young earth model, yes, they believe that when they read Genesis chapter 1 and it says there's evening and morning the first day, young earth model would take that day as a 24-hour period. And that is what we go about today. So today is Friday, the 5th of March, right? And it is roughly 1:40 Central Specific Time. So we're already more than halfway done with our day because we go about a 24-hour day. That's what a young earth model would believe, a 24-hour period, similar to what we are doing today. Okay. Now, what I tried to just finish explaining is an old earth model. They still believe in Genesis chapter 1. They are not taking anything away from Genesis chapter 1. Just like young earth, they still believe in Genesis chapter 1. They believe in a creator creating it all. They are just adding a little science to it. They are adding the geological aging methods that they have to age fossils, age artifacts that they have found in museums, this, that, or the other. And they are using those scientific methods of aging items to then go back to the Bible. And when it says there's evening and morning, first day, second day, third day, whatever day, well, maybe it wasn't a 24-hour day. Maybe that day was longer than that. Maybe that day was 1,000 years. But in the Creator's eyes, that was a day, but for the earth, it was actually longer. But in his eyes, it was just a day. So that's how the old earth model individuals would come to a better understanding of them saying, well, yeah, so the earth must be billions of years old because we saw dinosaur fossils in the museum and the person said that they're billions of years old. So then how on earth could our earth only be 6,000 years old? So someone's not right. I don't know. So that's how they're getting to that conclusion of billions of years old rather than thousands. So again, young earth people, or not people, young earth model believing individuals will not accept the aging method of science. So when you go to the museum and they say this fossil is 3 billion years old, they would not agree with that. They think that that aging method, that is a scientific method, they believe that scientific method is not accurate. And so, yes, they came up with a result of billions of years old, but they do not agree with that. They think that it's not accurate. Whereas old earth model people, when they hear that this fossil is, again, 3 billion years old, they can be like, okay, I can agree with that. I can agree with that because I can accept some of that aging method into my biblical belief. That doesn't take anything away from the creation account. It doesn't take away that a creator did not create it all. It just took longer than a 24-hour period. Does that answer your question? Yes, no. Did that answer your question? It seems like we're lagging a little bit.
Yes, it did.
Okay, great. Okay, well then we will move on to our last biblical model, which is theistic evolution. So theistic evolution model of creation of the universe and earth. This view holds Genesis chapter 1 farther away from God's inspired word to more of a poetic framework. So out of the three models that we're discussing today, this last one is looking at Genesis chapter 1, not literally. They are looking at it more as a poetic framework. So that means that they are not taking the Genesis chapter 1 account as a reliable source to age the earth and or saying that this is how the earth and the universe was created. So this is the first and only model of the ones that we are discussing today that start to put doubt and question in on if a creator created it. And remember, when I say it goes back to our question at the beginning of how long does it take to make dirt? So the it is dirt, okay? So as we continue, again, they look at it as a poetic framework for the creation story. In this model, creation of everything was more of a process than an actual event by God, using natural laws to orchestrate and create narratives. Okay, so that's a little bit more. So in this model, you can start seeing that there's a lot more science involved. There's a lot less of a deity or God involved in creation, okay? Because what we're seeing is that creation, if we look in Genesis chapter 1, creation is an event. It's something that happened. If you go with the young or old Earth models, they consider it an event. Now, they have debate on how long the event was, whether 6 days or billions of years, but it was an event. It was something that happened. It was something that took a beginning and an end to create. Okay, this theistic evolution is saying, well, Genesis chapter 1 is not a reliable source. Okay, it is not a reliable source to determine the age of the earth or how everything was created. Okay, it can be used as a poetic framework. It sounds good. It looks like a good way to organize it, but what we need to be mostly focusing on is natural laws. So gravity, evolution, just natural, scientific proven laws to do that. One could guess by its views of Genesis that this model fully accepts mainstream science. So again, we go from young Earth one model, doesn't accept science at all in its understanding of creation. Old Earth model accepts some mainstream science, incorporated in their literal interpretation of Genesis, to then theistic evolution model of creation as fully accepting of mainstream science. We don't really need to put an account of Genesis chapter 1. That is just a framework. It is not a reliable source to determine it, and it's not an event, okay? And with an acceptance of science, theistic evolution builds off that by agreeing that fossil and geological records are an accurate aging creation source. So as old Earth agreed with some, theistic evolution agrees with all of it. There is no doubt, there is no question that what they determine is the age of something is what the actual age is. And finally, are fossil records accurate? Theistic evolution would say yes, they are accurate, and that is the framework in which we need to build off of how everything was created. Okay, so as we finish with that, I've presented 3 different biblical models of creation: an young Earth model of creation, old Earth model of creation, and theistic evolution. And so out of those 3 models, we see a gradual increase in the level of science involved in the creation account. And so now with those 3 models in mind, the question is now again presented to y'all, the audience: how long does it take to make dirt? Did it take a short period of time? Did it take billions of years? Should we even be looking at Genesis chapter 1 as a framework and as a literal understanding of how everything was created? So that is a question that we all think about, we all consider. At some point in most human beings' lives, they ask the question, where did we come from? How are we here? How did this all happen? And we have to start looking for an answer. Some people run to science for that answer. They run to science for how was I here? How was I created? How did this happen? Some people run to religion. How was I here? How was I created? And what I'm presenting to you today is that yes, there's full this and full this. There's opposite of that. But I think a better understanding of creation needs to be a little bit more of a blended model between the two. And as that being said, I am drawing a conclusion to this presentation. So at this time, I will open up the floor to questions, comments, and we will do that just for a few moments. So are there any questions or comments about this presentation? Now would be a good time for that.
Close the boxes, that's not damage.
I believe that
We'll open up
with
more, see the
what
rest of the
for
pictures.
it, I believe that we should look at the old part,
Saying the carpet on the inside.
where it's a combination of science and the Bible.
You have to return a security deposit, $1,400. That's just.
Yeah, I believe that too.
Your boyfriend do damage to the.
But at the same time, how do we know how long
So she
the,
moved out May 5th, and then
years were created?
For the 5 days in May. No, is that correct?
Yeah, that's a really good question. How do we answer that? Now, this goes back to what I said at the beginning of the presentation. I don't quite have the answer for that. I can send you some resources
Correct.
to help further your research, but I'll also look into that so I can answer your question on that. Now, there's some people that feel like they can draw some conclusions on that based on aging and that sort of thing. So, for example, the very first day, Genesis chapter 1 on the first day, I'm going to mute. Hang on, I'm going to mute y'all. So I was getting a little feedback there. And so when you're ready to comment, unmute so you can comment. But some people take Genesis chapter 1, and at the end of the first day, there's a lot of people who see that as a day that took longer than a 24-hour period. Where they draw some of that, I need to do some further research to determine how they're getting there. I think there's a little bit more leaning towards science on that, on how long that took, and then day 2. But then when you get to like the events in day 5, the one where we read about the creatures in the sea and the birds of the air, it is my understanding, which could be wrong, but it is my understanding that that particular day, it is more feasible that that could have been a 24-hour period because it's creating life. It was creating life in the creatures of the sea and the birds of the air. That type of creation could have been done in a shorter period of time than the light being created and the expanse and God separating the light and the darkness and then forming land. Land could have taken thousands of years to do, maybe it did, but that's kind of, so really I'm saying all this, but really it comes down to, I need to do more research on that to better answer your question, but I'll also send you some resources on that. Anything else before we conclude this meeting? Anything else? Okay, well, again, I want to thank y'all so much for attending this presentation, and I hope that y'all can leave here honestly with more questions and answers, and be starting to consider something that maybe you haven't thought of before, which is a biblical model of creation of, well, is the people in the museum right? Like, are dinosaurs billions of years old? Or is what maybe we were taught at a young age of a day means a day, that was a 24-hour period, and our Earth is actually very young instead of. So I hope that this sparks some interest, sparks some research of maybe some things that y'all would like to do. And again, if this is sparking some interest, please contact me. I would be glad to point you in maybe not the right direction, but a direction of gathering resources to do your own research. So again, thank you so much, and I hope y'all have a wonderful day.